Warsaw, August 1944. The Germans begin bombing and don't stop until the city is in ruins. 250,000 Poles die. A few kilometers away, the Soviet Allied guns sit silently, not coming to the Poles' aid. In 1944, Warsaw was occupied by the Germans. That August, the resistance, the Polish Home Army, thought it could drive the Germans out, even though members of the resistance had few weapons and many were homemade. For 63 days, the people of the city lived under fire and incredible hardship. It ended with the Home Army's surrender on August the 2nd, 1944. Those who survived and were lucky fled the city. Those who couldn't flee were taken prisoner. 40 years later in Montreal, survivors of the uprising remember. Georges Ravitch fought for the Home Army and was wounded. Anna Serafin was a runner and a first aid attendant. Wilhelm Siemienski was a platoon commander, and Waldemar Romanowski was a corporal in the front lines.
Now, this is the ammunition which I picked up later on before I escaped from Poland. I went through the old city sector, and on the position where we were fighting, I found this, and this is the empty shell of the machine gun that I fired.
For all of them, the memory of that time is a nightmare.
It was terrible, as my friends told you. No water, no food, no munition, nothing.
If I went sometimes to see my sister, for example, she was in a hospital about 3-4 blocks in the back, so-called back. And then I really was getting scared because the houses were completely destroyed by bombing, and a lot of people were trapped under the houses and for days, and nobody could dig them out. There was no machinery for that, and so that's when I got scared that anything like that might happen to me.
The first half of Warsaw Uprising, every soldier caught by Germans was shot on the spot.
Ravitch, Serafin, Siemienski, and Romanowski have been working with the Canadian-Polish Congress to publicize and commemorate the 40th anniversary of the uprising.
Somehow in history written now, this battle is forgotten. But the Warsaw Uprising has also enormous meaning to Poles, and they feel somehow that they are left out of it.
But more than anything, the Poles feel betrayed by the Soviets.
They didn't want to help us. And of course, audience didn't understand why not. We were fighting on the same side against Germans, so why not to help these people fighting Germans?
Stalin, they didn't want us to succeed. They withdrew army about 40 kilometers, and they waited until the Germans finished us.
Bob Vogel is a history professor specializing in World War II. He says the uprising was started as much to prevent the Russian occupation of Warsaw as to get the Germans out.
The real tragedy, I guess, was that each of the participants, in a sense, was their own worst enemy. The Russians behaved ambiguously enough and brutally enough so that they can then be accused of almost anything and can be made to stick. The Poles staged an uprising which was in many respects suicidal, because even if they had won, they would not, in all likelihood, have changed the Russian position.
Vogel agrees the Warsaw Uprising was one of the worst civilian tragedies of the war. Ironically, the Poles staged the uprising to become a free people, but history shows the uprising had the exact opposite effect. Helena Kazabon, CBC News, Montreal.